This is the Committee on Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Affairs. I want to welcome everyone to the hearing. I understand that state law currently requires that the following announcement be made at the beginning of every remote public hearing as follows. Due to the current public health emergency, City Council committees are currently meeting remotely. We are using Microsoft Teams to make these remote hearings possible. Instructions for how the public may view and offer public testimony at public hearings of council committees are included in the public hearing notes that are published in the Daily News, Inquirer, and Legal Intelligencer prior to the hearings, and can also be found on phlcouncil.com. I now note that the hour has come, and clerk, could you please call the roll to take attendance? Members that are in attendance will please indicate that you are present when your name is called. Also, please say a few brief words when responding so that your image will be displayed on screen when you speak. Madam Clerk?
Councilmember Gautier.
Councilwoman, you're on mute.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Chair, good morning, colleagues. Good morning, everyone present.
Good morning.
Councilmember Quinones Sanchez. Councilmember Johnson.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, good morning, good morning.
Good morning.
Councilmember Thomas.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Good morning, colleagues. I'm present.
Good morning.
Councilmember Jones. Councilmember Brooks.
Good morning, Madam Chair and colleagues and everyone.
Good morning.
And Chair Bass.
Good morning. I am present. Okay, so we do have a quorum to begin. And a quorum of this committee is present, and the hearing is now called to order. This is the public hearing of the Committee on Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Affairs regarding resolutions number 210198 and 210199. Clerk, will you please read the title of those resolutions?
Resolution number 210198, a resolution authorizing the Committee of Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Affairs to hold hearings to obtain an update on the status of the city's plan to ensure all parks or playgrounds owned or controlled by the City of Philadelphia are inclusive, intergenerational, and accessible, and for all disabilities and special needs. And resolution number 210199, a resolution authorizing the Committee of Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Affairs to hold hearings to obtain an update on the status of the City Council's security camera program for Philadelphia's playgrounds and recreation centers.
Thank you. Before we begin to hear testimony from the witnesses we have for today, everyone who has been invited to the meeting to testify should be aware that this public hearing is being recorded. Because the hearing is public, participants and viewers have no reasonable expectation of privacy. By continuing to be in the meeting, you are consenting to being recorded. Additionally, prior to recognizing members for the questions or comments they have for witnesses, I will note for the record at this time that we will use the chat feature available in Microsoft Teams to allow members to signify that they wish to be recognized. In order to comply with the Sunshine Act, the chat feature must only be used for this purpose. Before I call on the clerk to call the first panel, would any of my colleagues like to make any opening comments? Okay, seeing none, we're going to move right along here. Okay, and if we could have Madam Clerk, if we could, actually, I would like to take the resolutions out of order, just based on the urgency of the matter around 210199 regarding cameras in our playgrounds and recreation centers. So I would like to actually call the panels and witnesses on resolution 210199 first. Madam Clerk?
Our first panel is Aparna Palantino, Deputy Commissioner for Capital Infrastructure and Natural Lands Management from the Department of Parks and Recreation, and Catherine Ott Lovell, Commissioner of the Department of Parks and Recreation.
Very good. Thank you. And if we can have both of our testifiers state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Aparna Palantino.
You may proceed.
Okay. Good morning, Chairperson Bass and members of the Committee on Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Affairs. My name is Aparna Palantino, and I serve as the Deputy Commissioner of Parks and Recreation for Capital Infrastructure and Natural Lands Management. With me today is Commissioner Ott Lovell to testify on City Council Resolution number 210199, which authorizes hearings to obtain an update on the status of the City Council's security camera program for Philadelphia's playgrounds and recreation centers. To highlight the key data points on our security camera program from the handout labeled camera list that was provided to Council, since 2014, we have installed 1,536 security cameras at 126 sites citywide at a total cost of $5,328,775. An additional 20 sites are currently in either design or construction phases. There are 33 currently identified sites which are still in need of cameras, 3 of which will be part of the rebuild program. The estimated funding required to complete all of the projects in either the design or to be designed phase is $1,795,000. Our list of security cameras is a fluid document with additional sites added, prioritized, and updated based on input and funding allocations from City Council members and their designated staff. I would be happy to answer any questions that you may have on security cameras at the conclusion of Commissioner Ott Lovell's testimony, immediately following on criminal incident reporting. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner, do you want to go and then we'll take questions?
Yes, Madam Chair. Give me one sec to pull it up.
Sure.
Good morning, Chairperson Bass and members of the committee. I'm Commissioner Catherine Ott Lovell. I'm here today to provide annual reporting information on all known criminal incidents or activity which has taken place on parks and recreation land, whether recreation centers, playgrounds, or parks. We have provided 5 detailed criminal incident annual reports from 2016 through 2020, in keeping with both the law and the spirit of the requirements of Bill number 120828, introduced by Chairperson Bass and passed in 2013. Each report contains a detailed breakdown of Part 1 violent crimes, Part 1 property crimes, and Part 2 crimes at each Parks and Recreation controlled or owned site in all 10 council districts. For your information, the Uniform Crime Reporting Program divides offenses into 2 major classifications, known as Part 1 and Part 2 crimes. The types of actual reported offenses are indicated in a column under each part in the annual reports. In addition, all crime data was acquired up to 5 feet from our property boundaries. I encourage each of you to review the data provided, both the aggregate numbers as well as the council district specific numbers. Our department remains fully committed to working to lessen crime at all of our sites. However, Parks and Recreation can contribute only so much alone to solve the citywide violence issue. We can and do provide positive youth programs. We can and do provide teen mentoring as well as robust athletic and recreational supports. Too often, Parks and Recreation staff themselves are victims of violence, whether it be physically, emotionally, or psychologically. We earnestly ask for and need the support of families, the wider community, City Council, the police, Town Watch, and many other concerned citizens and groups to help us reduce gun violence and related criminal behaviors at our sites. Deputy Commissioner Palantino and I are happy to answer your questions concerning the security camera program as well as the annual crime reports. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. And so I'll just start first. I have a number of questions. And the first is, Commissioner, based on your statement, I'd like to know the reports that have been provided, how have they been provided? Because to the best of my knowledge, as the chair of Parks and Recreation, I have never received a report.
How have they been provided to you?
How have they been provided? You said that you've provided reports since 2016, that this data has been made available to district, I'm assuming to all council members. So how has this information been provided? I've obviously had several meetings with you over the course of the years regarding all sorts of matters, but we've never had an opportunity to sit down and discuss this very important information.
Yeah, we just created those reports and provided them within the last few weeks for those reports.
So they have not been done since 2016.
We have provided the reports since 2016, but you are correct. We have not provided them on an annual basis. Correct.
Okay, because that really works against the spirit of the legislation when it was introduced. The idea behind providing the reports was that if there is something happening, so for example, if in my district I have Pleasant Playground and something is happening and I see that there's an increase in activities around Pleasant Playground that are negatively affecting the quality of life for the residents and also for anyone who's using the center, making it less likely that people want to use the center, then that is an opportunity. By providing the reports, it allows me an opportunity to say, I want to invest more here. I need to beef up my town watch in this neighborhood. I need to talk to the managing director's office and see what kind of support we can get. But by not having those reports over the years, it's really added to the conditions that we see right now that has made everyone less safe, whether it's Parks and Recreation staff, whether it's our young people who are using these centers, the entire community. So I really have to say I'm very disappointed that it required a hearing. Let's be honest. It required a hearing for Parks and Recreation to follow the law and to provide to City Council the reports on what is happening regarding criminal activity at these sites.
Well, we now have the ability and the capacity to get the data that we need from PPD. So we should be able to provide these reports to you moving forward.
Was this data not available previously?
We have recently increased our capacity in terms of our GIS team. So we added a full-time member who's now working with PPD. We have the layers of data that we need. We have lots of information and data about our own recreation centers, but the crime data, of course, comes from the police department. So we now have the ability to do that, and we look forward to providing those reports in the future.
Is there any other outstanding reporting or information that is required by law that Parks and Recreation is not providing because they do not have the capacity to provide it?
Not that I know of.
Okay, I'd like a definitive answer. If you could just double check with your people while we are in the hearing and just make sure that there are no additional requirements that have been legislated that Parks and Recreation has not been providing because of capacity issues, unwillingness issues, whatever the issues are, that there is nothing else that's out there that's outstanding.
Madam Chair, we would need more information about what those specific requests were to be able to provide that information. At this point, I know of nothing that we should be providing that we aren't providing.
Did you know that that you should be providing this report before? Did you know that this report was legislated and the law?
I certainly didn't know until more recently that we had to provide that information. And so we worked to build the capacity and to get the data that we needed, the layers that we needed to provide that information. There was also some confusion about who could provide the information, because again, that's not information that we had within the department, within our own data. So we were happy to provide the information now. We will continue to provide the information on an annual basis.
Okay. Question regarding just going back to the security camera program. Can you speak about, or actually, I'm going to ask you to go back over the numbers, Aparna, if you would, regarding what has been done thus far.
Certainly. So to date, we've installed 1,536 security cameras at 126 sites. Mm-hmm. The total cost of this initiative to date is about $5,328,775. Mm-hmm. Additional 20 sites are either in design or construction,
Mm-hmm.
leaving 33 identified sites that are still in need of security cameras.
Okay.
The funding required for those 33 is 1.8 million, roughly.
1.8 million.
Yes.
And for the 20 in design, what's the cost on those?
20 in design, the cost is roughly $572,000.
Okay, so that's manageable. So my question is, and I don't know if you can answer this or the commissioner can answer this, but originally when we required or asked, not required actually, because this was not legislative. This was something that was an initiative my office undertook, working with all district members of council, and received a commitment from all district members that there was going to be over a 3-year time period, the resources allocated from their capital ITEF funds that would go into the security program. Ideally, because we started this in 2014, it should have been wrapped up in 2017. So you can imagine my concern and just not being able to understand why, when we have shootings now, why they are not caught on camera when they're happening at our rec centers. Because in my mind, we addressed this by making sure that there were cameras at every site. And so can you talk to me as to why in 2021, which is 4 years past the expiration date, we don't have cameras at these sites? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Certainly. Actually, in 2014, we had developed a list of sites, and the total cost of that initiative was approximately $3.7 million in total. In 2014, the sites that were identified were primarily staff sites. Over the course of time, we've noticed that there are other assets in our system that are also in need of security camera installation. So these are smaller unstaffed sites, they're neighborhood parks that are also requiring cameras. So council members have had to redirect some of their funding based on the need in particular areas. So in fact, we've spent almost $2 million more than what was originally anticipated on this initiative. And there's been a significant number of sites added to the initial list, which is why we still have sites remaining.
So, but my question is this.
Mm-hmm.
So if we know that there are additional sites that were added, and I'm assuming that they were added in 2014 or through the course of somewhere between 2014 and 2017, in my mind, everything that we identified in 2014 should have been completed. And that doesn't seem to be the case.
So the sites have been added over time from 2014 until today. The challenge is also that this initiative is funded by city council members, and it is reliant on availability of funding. Oftentimes, these camera installations are done in conjunction with the capital project that occurs at a site. So if we're doing an improvement, city council members will elect to include cameras in that project. So some of the funding has been directed to other locations.
Okay.
Yep.
So, so can you give me the rundown of the sites that are still in design and that are in design and in need right now?
I can, and we've also provided that document as part of our submission today. So the sites in design, some of which are also rebuild. I just want to clarify. Sites in design include Murphy, Seeger, Star Garden, Granahan, Houston, Mander, Parkside, Evans, Diston, Jacobs, McCardle, Houseman, Zeiler, Hammond and Nedrow, and Tarkin.
Okay.
Those are currently in design.
Mm-hmm.
And the remaining sites include Pops, Heron, Rizzo Rink, Sachs Playground, Samuel, Sabati, Eastwick, Garin, Stinger, Wharton Square, Laura Sims, 39th and Olive, Carousel House, Conshohocken Playground, Gustine, Hillside, John Anderson, Schuler, Amos, Francisville, Holmesburg, Mullen, Ramp, Carmela, Cruz, Furco, Gambrell, McPherson, McIlvain, and Ramblers.
Okay. So I will be, I'm just going to ask you off the cuff
Sure.
because I haven't actually looked at the list, but I'd like to know, is there any one particular part of the city? Are those spread out evenly, or are there some parts of the city that we're seeing less cameras than others?
No, they're generally spread out evenly. And many of the sites, as I mentioned, there's about 7 of them that are rebuilt, so that they will be installed in conjunction with the rebuild project. Mm-hmm. And the remaining sites are often smaller sites. So there isn't a concentration in any one particular area.
Okay. I'm going to open it up for questions from my colleagues. I see Councilwoman Gauthier had a question. Councilwoman?
I have more of a comment. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes.
Good morning, Commissioner Outlevel. Good morning, Aparna. I wanted to thank Parks and Rec for all they've been doing. As everyone knows, we've had tragic shootings at rec centers. I had a mass shooting. We had a mass shooting at Christie Rec Center. I believe we had a shooting last night in West Smoke Creek at the playground or near the playground. Catherine's looking puzzled, so if that's false information, then I don't want to put it out there. And so it's just been a heartbreaking time. But I do want to say that, I've seen Parks and Rec step up immediately to come together with community, to come together with me and my office to make necessary improvements. The day after the incident at Christie, they were out there making improvements to the lighting. They got new fencing up immediately. That is a site where we have cameras, so we were able to, pull some of that data. And we're going forward not only with physical improvements, but also with bringing the community together to ensure that we can have a robust amount of safe programming for the community. And so what happened was tragic, but it means so much to have the attention and the dedication that we've had from the Parks and Rec team, even after such a tragic incident, and that's what it's going to take, that type of partnership and engagement to change the perception, right? Not only around Christie Rec, but in all of the areas where we've had these tragedies. And I also want to acknowledge that we had to make some really hard decisions last year. We cut the Parks and Rec budget by a lot. And I think everyone on council realizes how important these assets are to our community. And so I hope that we'll make different decisions this budget cycle so that we can have, the staffing, the security, the programming, and the physical improvements that we need to really have, safe, active centers that are assets to our community. So thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Councilwoman. I appreciate your commendation of Parks and Rec. I think that there's a lot to be done. I'll just say it that way. There's a whole lot to be done. And one of the things that I would like to see is from Parks and Recreation is more of a sense of urgency around these cameras. We have to have them up, and like yesterday, again, this is something that was initiated in 2014 and was supposed to be completed in 3 years. And I understand that, things happen, additional sites were added. If the data we had been provided with from Parks and Rec was accurate in the first place, then we probably could have got it done in a more reasonable time frame. So I would like to see more of a sense of urgency. And I'd like for you, Commissioner, to address how you intend to make that happen. so that we can figure out, when a shooting happens, hopefully we won't have any more shootings in our rec centers. That's the ultimate goal, is not to have them. But when they do happen, what can we do? What can Parks and Rec do to keep our children safe? Because one of the things that I really want to point out here is that outside of the Philadelphia Police Department and Commissioner Outlaw and DHS and Cynthia Figueroa, Parks and Rec has in my opinion, the absolute obligation to keep our children in safe spaces. So I think in terms of, the ranking of city departments and where our children need to be, how do we keep them safe? Parks and Recreation is way up here. It's almost at the top of the food chain. And yet we are not seeing the level of investment and the urgency that I would like to see. And I think that we need to see to make everyone feel safe and to make sure that people feel comfortable going into our sites. The next resolution that we're going to hear about is actually on making our spaces intergenerational. And so that's a place where, let's say if you're a grandmother and you care for your grandkids, you can take your grandkids over to the rec center or to the playground, and it's welcoming for you. It's a place you want to be as well. They're intergenerational. They're open for people with different disabilities. There's just a lot going on for everyone at the site. So, but the bottom line is people don't want to go if they don't feel safe. And so it's a heavy lift, but it is a responsibility of Parks and Recreation. So I'd like to hear your response.
Well, I want to thank Councilmember Gautier for her kind words and for her incredible, leadership and support. As many of these incidents have happened in her district, and for bringing us together with the police captains in her district and community leaders and community organizations. And, to be honest, Madam Chair, we're doing everything we can. And I totally agree with you that Parks and Recreation needs to be a priority. We need to be viewed as an essential human social service in the city of Philadelphia, and we need to be funded as such. And it is an incredible challenge to run a system our size. We are blessed to have a Parks and Recreation system that's larger than any other city our size, maybe one of the largest in the country. New York City has about 50 recreation centers. You have to pay to go into them. They have a population 10 times our size. We have 159 recreation centers. We're blessed. We've made that decision, to have these centers in every community of our city. And they are deeply loved by Philadelphians. And, at 100 of our recreation centers, we have one person on staff. And can you imagine being that one person in that facility doing everything we expect them to do by themselves? They're siloed. They're scared and still trying to be advocates and champions and in many ways families for these young people. We've made a commitment to, as of this week, and in part as a response to the increase in violence that we're seeing specifically at rec centers and open spaces over the last few weeks. I can't explain why people are choosing to bring guns and solve problems at parks and recreation centers over the last 6 weeks. I can't explain that, but I can tell you it's happening. And in response to that, we're choosing to we're making the choice to make sure we have 2 staff people at all rec centers to make sure that our staff feels safe and that families feel safe sending children to our centers. It is heartbreaking to go out into these communities and hear mothers and grandmothers say that I don't feel safe sending my kid down to the playground anymore because there was a shooting there. It's heartbreaking. Yeah. It's heartbreaking that I have to second guess it when I bring my kids to my playground in West Philadelphia, after 6 o'clock at night. That should not enter your mind. And let me tell you that the kids who were shot, they were doing exactly what we want them to do. They were getting out of their homes and going down to the playground to play ball. And so what I can say is we absolutely feel a sense of urgency. I feel it like I've never felt anything in my life. Everyone on our staff feels a sense of urgency. I believe the administration, the Office of Children and Families, feels an incredible sense of urgency, and I felt a level of support from them that I haven't felt in the 5 years that I've been in city government. It's been extraordinary. And the police as well. I've talked to the police inspectors, the deputy commissioners more over the last 5 weeks. There is a commitment, they've authorized overtime for the sites that have the highest rates of crime and violence, and where our leaders feel that they need the extra support for police. So we now have a police presence at more than 50 of our sites. And we're working closely with, again, community organizations. I had a wonderful meeting yesterday, over an hour, with the Black clergy to talk to them about the support that they want to provide. So I feel that we are finally at a point, I think, where people are recognizing exactly what you said, Chairwoman, that Parks and Recreation does need to be here.
Yes.
Needs to be here. It needs to be prioritized. It needs to be resourced at that level. It needs to be supported at that level and championed at that level, right? And until we get to that point, we're going to continue to struggle as a city, because we have chosen to have this amazing system in place, right? And we have to be prepared to support that system. So I feel that sense of urgency. That's what I can say to you in response.
Well, I think that, and I know that Councilwoman Brooks and Councilman Thomas were next up, but I just want to say this. I'm glad to hear that you feel a sense of urgency. I'd like to see it put into action. One of the things that I'd like to have all members of council do is, as I said, because of the urgency of what we see now around our young people, really fight for an additional, for an increase in funding for Parks and Rec in the upcoming budget cycle. But what we want to see is not just an increase in funding, but an increase, a direct result of the increase in funding should be an increase in programs and services from the rec centers. And I kind of thought that was already on the administration's agenda when Parks and Recreation was moved over from the managing director's office over to the deputy mayor for children and youth, Cynthia Figueroa. So I don't know if that was what the strategy was behind that, or why that actually happened. You're nodding your head yes. So was that going to come with an increase in funding, Commissioner?
I would say an increase in resources, certainly, Chairwoman.
Okay, good.
Yeah, the support that we've received from the deputy mayor and her team has been extraordinary. To give you an example, after these shootings occurred, these centers where these shootings occurred are access centers. We've got children there who were showing up at 7:30 the next morning, right? And parents who are leaving their children at a center to learn while they have to go to work, right? Mm-hmm. And, OCF provided us with immediate services around behavioral health supports for staff and children. Mm-hmm. Again, that was always available to us, but I want to say that the responsiveness of the deputy mayor and her first deputy and everyone at OCF, they just understand, I think, children and families at a deeper level than probably anyone in city government, as they should. That's their job. But just we've felt an incredible amount of resources and support, and that is, I think was a really good match to match our department, in that world, especially from the recreation side of what we do. On the park side of what we do, we work closely with, Otis, transportation infrastructure, right? Sustainability in the water department. But from the people side of what we do, like the merger of Parks and Recreation, was a merger of really people and places, right? And so from the people side of what we do, to your point, it's a massive part of what we do. And it is different from other cities, because in other cities, you don't have this presence that we have. We are probably one of the most public facing city agencies in the city of Philadelphia, because we're everywhere, and so just having that connection to communities and families and children on an every hour of everyday level is something that requires this heightened level of leadership and support. And, I'm thrilled that the Deputy Mayor Figueroa has been able to provide that with her team. And it's just the beginning. I mean, we've only been over there for a few months, mm-hmm. but the tremendous leadership that we received there has really been a blessing for us.
Okay, very good. Well, I'm glad to hear that the additional resources are going in, and but what we want to see is, as we fight for dollars, we want to see as much programming, as much activity. These centers should be churning out activities, not round the clock, but we want to see the investment, and we want to see opportunities for folks who live in the neighborhood, who know these kids, to be engaged and to connect with them and to, help along the way. We understand that, a large workforce, part of the workforce of Parks and Recs is civil service, but we need to figure out how do we also get folks who live in those neighborhoods to be a part of the fabric of what's happening, because it is just so grassroots and on the ground, and, folks want to be connected. So, Councilwoman Brooks had a question. Oh, did we lose her? Councilwoman Brooks. Okay, we'll come back. Councilman Thomas, are you here?
I am, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to be brief. First of all, thank you, Commissioner. I appreciate the work you're doing, partnering with your office on resource hubs and a number of different initiatives. Has been great. But I think that I share the sense of urgency a lot of my colleagues with some of the stuff that's being discussed today. So I just have a couple questions. I don't want to beat a dead horse. I do agree that we need a sense of urgency around cameras. So first thing, if we don't, for the places that we don't have cameras in place, and we know that we're not going to be able to get them in place in time, like what can we do to supplement for the lack of cameras as we prepare for the summertime? Is there any suggestions, recommendations? I mean, as council members, we want to hear that. You have my word multiple times, and I'll say it publicly. I agree with our chair, Councilmember Bads, that we all need to be committed to fighting for more money for Parks and Recs, and I am committed to that this budget cycle. But I'm curious to know, if we do know that there are going to be rec centers where we can't have cameras in place, what would you recommend or suggest be there to supplement the lack of cameras?
I think, Councilman Thomas, first of all, thank you so much for your leadership. You've been extraordinary in terms of, just your interest in partnering with us to actually provide those programs, as the chairwoman says, around the clock. I've just been so inspired by your office's commitment to, partner with us and connect us to just amazing resources and partners. So thank you. To you and your whole team. I don't mean to punt this, but I do think that that's a bigger question for the police department. Cameras, the truth is cameras are not, I'm not a law enforcement professional, but my understanding is that cameras are less of a, sort of proactive approach, and they're more reactive. So they're not a deterrent as much as they're a way that after a crime happens, there's a way to capture that. And I can tell you, like, I personally responded, at 11 o'clock at night at Christie and at Myers, and, to provide that surveillance data to the police. And it was incredibly helpful, I think, to them. But I think it's an after the fact thing of helping to sort of solve the crime or get more information about the crime as opposed to a deterrent. We haven't found it to be a deterrent. I mean, if anything, the crime at rec centers is increasing, and we now have 1,500 cameras up, right? So the more cameras we add, it's certainly not going down the crime, but I do know the police have found it very helpful to capture that data after the fact. So I think that's more of a question for the police, as to what kind of supports they might need to capture this information, at our sites. We're not law enforcement professionals, and we're doing our best here to keep kids safe and to care for kids. What we do is we love kids, we care for kids, we provide, as the chairwoman said, activities and programs to enrich kids' lives in a positive way, but we don't fight crime.
No, I agree. I agree 100%. I'm thinking about the comfort of staff, and I'm thinking about people coming to work every single day and making them feel comfortable. So I 100% agree with everything you're saying. I'm just wondering, again, because we're having this conversation, and, I want to make a fiscal commitment to support you and to provide what you need. So I guess if that changes and you think of maybe something that you feel like should be at rec centers that don't have cameras, please let us know, and we will want to hear that. The second thing, and then I'll pass it back to you, Madam Chair. With all due respect, Commissioner, I disagree with you about 2 staff members at every rec center. I think you need more. When you talk about 2 staff members at every rec center, I'm assuming you're talking about 1 supervisor and 1 program person. Is that correct?
Not even that, Councilman.
So is the supervisor and 1 part-time person?
Yeah, it's a seasonal person.
So Commissioner, I appreciate you being fiscally conservative. I think that is the responsible thing to do with the hat that you wear. But I would appreciate if you maybe come back to us and let us know how much it will cost to kind of change those numbers. So I'm thinking about some conversations that I've had. I'm deep in the rec centers, so I'm always talking to staff there. I think about a rec center like what Councilmember Gaudier talked about over in her district. There's no way we could have 2 staff members at that rec center. That has a pool there and it has so many things going on. 2 staff is not going to get it. Now, if we talk about another small rec center, even the Happy Hollow in Councilmember Bass district, which is a smaller rec center, they still have the boxing ring on the outside too. So I know that we have. I'm sorry. Okay, so I know we have some rec centers that are small in the city that can get away with the 2 staff members, but I think that we should have at least 3 full-time staff members at our larger rec centers in the city of Philadelphia, and then explore maybe what it looks like to have some of the part-time staff making sure rec centers are open till 8:30 and 9 o'clock at night and things like that. So if you could help us with that, I would want to aim towards that. I know that that's not the most fiscal conservative goal, but I think when we're looking at what we're going to see as it relates to the amount of crowds and the amount of people that are going to be using our rec centers this summer, because people are just going to be so anxious to get out the house. Also, Commissioner, I commend you too, because without you, we wouldn't have pools. And I firsthand know all the hurdles and obstacles that you had to jump through to get your lifeguard certified to make sure that our pools can be open. So we don't even have to put that on the record, but I know that was a difficult process. So just anticipating the type of crowds and what we're going to attract this summer. I know you can't answer this right now, but if you could get back to us and let us know how much more money should we put into Parks and Recs to get us more full-time staff members, as well as the 1 or 2 part-time staff members you're asking for, and then to assure that the bigger rec centers have even more staff than that. I think that would be a good dream situation for us. Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate it.
Madam Chair, could I provide a
Certainly.
point of clarification?
Certainly.
Yeah. So just to be clear, that is our smaller centers with the 2 staff. So our larger centers, right? So right now we classify our centers A through D, right? So our A centers, Christie would be an A center. It has a gym, it has a pool, it's a large facility. So there are 4 full-time staff at Christie, right? So at our smaller centers, like Madam Chair, the Stenton Park, right? That's 1, right? You've got Tom over there by himself. Now we're going to give him a seasonal to make sure he has someone over there with him. But so at our smaller centers, it might be 2 people, right? But then at our larger centers, right, especially where we have gyms, you're going to find there's 3 on average people at that center. Now, what I can do is I can send you a staffing schedule, if that would be helpful, Madam Chair, of all of our centers and the
Absolutely.
staff that are assigned to each of those centers, and we can separate that by council district, so you can get a sense of who's at your centers, what their title is, whether it's full-time, part-time, or seasonal staff. We can send that information to you. And then, of course, we staff up in the summer, right? So when we're running 130 summer camps and pools, you might have 15 people at a center between lifeguards, pool maintenance attendants, seasonal maintenance staff. That's our Super Bowl season. So we staff up. The policy change that I was talking about, or the practice change that I was talking about, is that, previously at about 100 of our centers at any one time, right? Like, for example, using Stenton Park as an example, you might see Tom there by himself. We're saying now that we don't want anybody there by themselves, so we're going to have 2 people on. But the way we're filling that in is through seasonal support. And those are individuals we're hiring right from the community, to work at these centers, to be there as a presence while the supervisor is on, if that supervisor is on by themselves. If that's helpful.
Thank you, Commissioner. I appreciate it. And again, if anything changes and you feel like we need more staff at rec centers, if we feel like we need more support, please let us know, because I think that you're probably going to see the busiest summer at rec centers coming out of this pandemic than what we've seen in recent history. So anything we can do to support, any more staffing and anything like that outside of what's already happening, please let us know, and we're here. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilman. I think that really sums up the sentiment of all of council, is that we want to be helpful. We need to know what's necessary. We want programs, we want services, because outside of, as I said, police and DHS, Parks and Recreation is really who we look to keep our kids safe in the city of Philadelphia. And many of us look towards the summer with a sense of anticipation, because everybody loves summer, but also a sense of dread, because we also know that there's going to be unfortunately a level of violence which is unacceptable. So thank you, Councilmember Thomas. I just have one quick question, and I'm going to ask Councilwoman Brooks to ask her questions, and that is, does Parks and Recreation have a plan for American Rescue Act dollars that are coming into Philadelphia? Have you put together any sort of a plan or thought, or what's your thoughts on the funding that's coming through, what the needs are of the department, and how you might go about securing those needs and making your case for them?
I know almost nothing, Councilmember Bass, about the rescue funds. What we do is we provide a budget to the finance office, a proposed budget, and then that goes through the city's budget process. So that's what we do. We provide information of our needs and we provide all the information the budget office asks us to provide, and that's how that works for us.
I would strongly suggest that you have your budget people look at what some additional needs might be and how they can be addressed through that funding that's going to be coming through, with so many folks who are going to be paying attention to the money coming in. Everybody's got a plan, and I would like to see a plan for our children who are going to be in these centers. So I would hope that Parks and Rec could be proactive in terms of anticipating that some of these funds coming through should be coming through your doors as well.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Councilman.
Can I get a point of clarification just for
Certainly.
a moment?
Yes. Chair recognizes Councilman Johnson.
So, Commissioner, just in regards to the question regarding relief dollars, can you just give us an overview on what and you can just summarize it, what your budget needs look like? I mean, Parks and Rec has never been restored since the services have been cut under the another administration. And so what is your fiscal ask that you're looking for in this upcoming budget cycle that we can, as council members, can take in consideration when the relief dollars come down, but even separate from the relief dollars, just the general budget that will be presented in City Council in this upcoming weeks?
So I appreciate the question, Councilman. I'm going to have to ask you to pose that question to the Finance and Budget Office. I'm not trying to deflect. I'm being as candid as you all know me to be, which is, this is a challenging situation you're putting us in. We have presented both our reductions and justifications to the budget office, and I understand that the situation the administration is in trying to accommodate all of the needs across all departments in the city of Philadelphia. I understand that. I respect that. And and I appreciate that. And so we're really
Commissioner, I'm gonna push a little. And Madam Chair, if you could just
Sure.
be patient with me. I'm going to push a little harder right now. My colleague, Councilman Jamie Gardier, myself, target around 15 million, right? And so we don't want you to be shy, because for us, we believe that part of our gun violence prevention strategy should include Parks and Rec, right?
Yes.
That keeps our young people safe. This is the reason why Madam Chair is bringing this hearing today. And so what is your budget ask? Or are you feeling comfortable speaking on the record as it relates to what you're going to be coming and asking for in terms of members of council?
What I feel comfortable saying is that I think you have to address those questions to the Finance and Budget Office for the city. We go through the process that we go through with the Budget Office to present justifications for what we feel we need in the department. And
what are justifiable needs, Commissioner? I think that's what the question was, and I think that's what council members are asking. Have you started your preliminary budget request that will come to council in this upcoming weeks? And do you know what that ballpark figure is?
Yeah, we have submitted requests to the budget office, and if you will just allow me to circle back with them, and then we can come back to you with that, I would be grateful.
Point of information, if I may.
Chair recognizes Councilman Gauthier.
I think a good way to begin looking at this is looking at what we cut last year, which was $12 million from the Parks and Recreation budget.
Yeah.
And we know that even last year, we weren't where we needed to be to really serve our neighborhoods well. So as council, I'm hoping that we can look at the restoration and then put some money on top of that we think will get us robust staffing and programming for our neighborhoods at this time.
Councilwoman, I appreciate your advocacy for Parks and Recreation, but I really think that the commissioner, in her leadership role, we really need for her to be the voice that speaks with the administration and fights for these funds that we need to see coming out of the general fund and into her budget. So, from Councilman Kenyatta Johnson's questions, I would just say this: if you don't feel comfortable, Commissioner, giving us a number or giving us or laying it out for us, I would just strongly urge you to make sure that you communicate to your people to put together a plan so that even if they throw the plan, listen, if they put it through the shredder, you presented a plan, you presented an option. I think that we have to look beyond just maybe we'll get this or hopefully we'll get that. No, I think we have to look beyond that, and we have to fight for every dollar for our kids. Because as I said before, this is not about me. It's not about you. It's not about any of these members on council. None of us is going to be on those swings. Well, maybe some of us are, but I'm not going to be on those. I'm not going to be on those swings. It's a sight to see, I'm sure, if I was. But for our kids who are going to be there, for my kid, my 11-year-old, that I use my neighborhood playground, Pleasant Playground, for, and I want to take her. I want to be safe. Everybody wants to be safe. We all want these to be safe spaces. And so with money coming in and knowing that money is coming in, I'm not saying you have to ask for, 25, $100 million or whatever. But you should be, in my opinion, requesting, planning for something to come through your doors that is going to keep our kids safe. And listen, maybe it is $100 million. And if it is, I'm fine with that, or more. But whatever it is, it's got to be something. We've got to do some planning, some forward thinking about what are we going to do to keep these kids safe. And we know that there's a large sum of money that's coming into the city of Philadelphia, and how much of it is going to Parks and Recreation. You need a plan. You need a plan to get some of that.
Yeah, so I want to be clear. We absolutely have a plan. We call it realigning as we rebuild. It's goal 3 of our department strategic plan. Not only does it increase staffing at our recreation centers, it does so with a lens of racial equity across our entire system. It reduces historic racial disparities in terms of how we staff our system. The theory in it is that we want to move from staffing facilities based on their size to staffing communities based on their needs. So we absolutely.
So how much is that?
I'd have to get back to you exactly as to what it would cost. We've been implementing it on a gradual basis. This year we were able to salvage a bit of our budget to begin to implement that staffing realignment in 3 of our districts, which we hope to roll out in the near term. And then we have we will need additional funds to do that throughout our system. But I just wanted to respond to your question, to your comment, Madam Chair, that yes, totally agree. We need a plan. We have a plan. I believe it's a very good data-informed plan. And again, the decisions around how much funding our department receives is above my pay grade. So
So this is a plan for the American Rescue Act dollars.
No, ma'am.
So that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about We need a plan for that for our kids. Like, we need to sow some money into our children. There's no question about it. And we need Parks and Rec to be at the top. As we said, we need the police department, we need DHS, anyone who's coming into contact with our young people. DHS, and then Parks and Recreation should be right there. And so what does that look like for funding for our departments? I'm not going to beat a dead horse. I know that we got some other questions from members, but I can only say it's a huge mistake not to plan for the use of some of those dollars for our children who are in crisis in the city right now. Councilwoman Brooks.
Madam Chair, if you don't mind, can I just make one comment, if you don't mind?
Yes. If you want to, yes, Councilman.
You know what? I would defer to my time. Don't worry about it. I would defer to Kendra Brooks, Councilwoman Brooks, until when I have my opportunity to speak.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Councilman. Councilwoman Brooks.
Yeah, thank you so much, Madam Chair. So, my questions most of them were pretty much asked and kind of spread out amongst my council colleagues. And I want to kind of talk about this $15 to $20 million possibility that could go into Parks and Rec. And my concern, similar to my concern with the conversation I had with the School District of Philadelphia, is there any way that these funds could be targeted in the highest hit zip codes where we see the most gun violence and the most incarceration of young folks in general? So when we push, many of my council colleagues are on here saying that we're willing to push 15 million, 20 million, whatever it takes, not just to restore Parks and Rec, but to push Parks and Rec further. And Catherine, Commissioner, you know that I'm a Parks and Rec person. I come out of Parks and Rec, so I know the cause for quality programming. I just want to know and hear that when we push for these funds, you said the racial equity lens, and I get that, but I also feel like we need to do a huge push in coordination with all of these services in the hardest hit zip codes through gun violence, this pandemic, and mass incarceration, if we're really talking about seeing real change for young people. So the plan that you're thinking, is that in consideration? What will that look like? And as we push for these funds, I just need to hear you say that that's something we can make happen. Because, Stanton Park is my park. I know his time there by himself all day. Luckily, he has education works with him now, doing an access center. But still, when Tom goes, I don't know the other guys that come after Tom leaves. It's still like we have a beautiful park. We need thriving programming. And we need that to happen immediately. And this plan needs to be enacted like over the next couple of weeks because summer is coming. And, I just need to hear that. I heard your urgency, but I just need to hear that that's something we can make happen. Last night or the night before last, we lost 3 or 4, I forgot the number, 3 or 4 people to gun violence, whether it was death, involvement, or lives changed forever. And they're all young folks out of my community. And I need to make sure that the next generation has something else to reach forward to. And I see Parks and Recs as one of those tools.
Thank you, Council Member. And thank you also for your great leadership and great understanding of the power of Parks and Rec to lift up our city and our communities. I do believe that the plan that we have in place that we've worked incredibly hard on, I want to be clear that this plan called Realigning as We Rebuild was not just worked on by leadership, it was worked on by the rank and file of our staff for every 2 weeks for 10 months. And it was data informed. So using data from equity data, health data, crime data that we presented to, in the beginning of this hearing around these crime reports. Also amenity data, the types of amenities at a site, population data informed us, basically giving a score to each of our centers based on that data, what we call a priority score. And the idea in this plan is that we would create community service areas that would, basically serve an entire community with programming. So, why do we have parks, throughout our city that are not programmed, right? Why do we have centers that are small and considered a D center, so they don't have staff, therefore they don't give out meals? So the idea is to change that mindset through this plan and through this data-driven approach. giving scores to our centers and then assigning a staffing complement based on that score, as opposed to just the size of a facility or what the facility has historically gotten in terms of staffing. It's a very significantly different approach than we've ever taken in the department. It's something we feel really passionately about, and I think it would address much of what I've heard today. So that is something that we stand ready to implement. Our goal was to implement it 3 districts at a time so that we can continue to evaluate it as we implement it. Our first, so not 3 council districts, 3 Parks and Rec districts at a time. We have 10 Parks and Rec districts that aren't exactly aligned with the council districts geographically. That was our goal, is to roll it out that way, dependent on the funding that we receive to implement that plan. But it does involve increased staffing, increased programs, better coordination with local community organizations. It's a pretty robust plan.
Thank you. Is that something we can see? Because I would like to see what it looks like. Can you get a copy over to my office, please?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Madam Chair, that ends my line of questions.
Thank you, Council Lady. Councilman Kenyatta Johnson, next up.
Thank you, Councilwoman Bass, Madam Chair, and also just thank you for doing this hearing. First and foremost, Commissioner, just want to acknowledge the work that you have done throughout my district, particularly around just creating safe spaces for our young people. And so for me, it's imperative that when we talk about Parks and Rec and the programming, that's what one of my colleagues has talked about. The program, I think, is essential when we talk about violence prevention, and most important, creating safe spaces for our young people during this upcoming summer. And so the reason why I continue to press around, as Councilwoman Gardier just touched on, the cuts that have taken place during not even just prior to the pandemic, but also under the another administration, because those cuts significantly impact young people who wouldn't have anything else to do during these summer hours. And so as we see this level of gun violence that are taking place in the city of Philadelphia right now, most people that I have run in contact with, and I've been doing a tour at all of my rec centers, Peace Not Guns tour, to particularly organize people inside the neighborhood to partner with Parks and Rec at those rec centers, so they can be the people that's actually patrolling. Because obviously, I want to make sure that we have the cameras at key particular sites where we see high incidence of crime and violence, but also want to make sure that we're being proactive and organizing the community to step up to the plate. And if they're allowed to partner with Parks and Rec and utilize the space, right, then hopefully we can have a level of impact on the gun violence that we're seeing, but also that partnership with the police department to make sure that they have a presence during those high peak times, just to deter anyone if they decide to come on the basketball court or in the playground or any of that nonsense that we have been seeing. And so for me, I just wanted you to clarify a couple things. And I'm an advocate of making sure we increase this budget, right? But I also want to make sure, talk about the racial equity lens, because I do want to zero in on how we hire individuals. I know civil service, for me, is an obstacle when it comes to regular people from the neighborhood having the opportunity to work at these sites. And I do know there's opportunities, I guess, through seasonal hiring, but I want to see how can we increase local people being hired and have that opportunity to work in the rec centers, because that plays a major role in deterring young people that they know from at least coming into the park with the nonsense. So can you give me an overview on the plan and the strategy? And I do want to say publicly that I view this as a violence prevention. Parks and Rec is a part of a long-term violence prevention strategy, keeping our young people occupied, because once the parks and recreation centers were shut down and then the schools were shut down, what else the kids going to do? And so my grandmother always taught me an idle mind is the devil's workshop. And so we're going to do what we do because there's nothing else to do. And so give me your perspective on that in terms from a racial equity lens standpoint, and then your overall strategy on, and you touched on it a couple of times, but from a prevention standpoint, keeping our young people occupied in terms of specifically programming?
Yeah, so I know I've talked a little bit in previous hearings about our struggles with the civil service process, and but I will say that I'm really proud of some work that we've done over the last 2 years to completely overhaul how we hire our recreation leaders, recreation leader trainees. I think it's one of the most significant things we've done over the last few years at Parks and Rec, and I know it's something that the Mayor's Office of Inclusion and Diversity is pretty proud of as well. We recognize that at least on the program side of what we do, those 300 recreation leaders, that we were really challenged in terms of the racial diversity and also the geographic diversity of where those individuals were coming from. And the way that moves up into the pipeline of management in our department, because it's all promotional, was incredibly disconcerting as well, because most of the managers in our department were non-diverse as well. So it really was clear to me that in order to fix that, we have to start with fixing how we hire recreation leader trainees, which is the entry level position into our department on the program side. So 2 years ago, we worked with the Office of Human Resources to, completely change how we hire our rec leaders through the civil service process. I want to be clear that we absolutely ran this through the civil service process. And I think it's a model moving forward for how you can make change within the civil service parameters. If I have a few minutes, I can tell you about that process. We changed the specs. So we changed the specification for the position to cast a wider net. For instance, you could have applied and been qualified if you had a major in dance, but not education. So we changed the specifications to allow for more experience over a different kind of education, and then to allow a wider range of backgrounds, majors that you could apply with. And then we cast a wide net in terms of a recruitment effort. We had never recruited. The city doesn't really recruit proactively for its positions. And so we first went to our seasonal base, which is incredibly diverse because we have thousands of seasonals who work for us and they come from the communities. And so we went there first, and we asked for, staff to identify sort of our all-star seasonals who would qualify for this position. We held information sessions in communities, in recreation centers, to tell people about how to become a recreation leader. And then at those information sessions, we actually, set people up on a computer to go in and create an account in the city system. It's very mystifying. I don't know if anyone here has ever applied for a civil service job, but it's mystifying. And so we broke that down for folks, and then we were sort of an advocate or a navigator for them throughout the process. We reached out to all of the HBCUs, who had appropriate majors where kids would qualify for this. And then, so we did the spec, we changed the spec, we changed how we recruited, and then we changed the test. It wasn't a written examination, like 100-question written examination. We changed it to an oral examination, so more like an interview. And we had our own individuals help to our staff create the test and also become the raters for the test. And then the last thing that we did is we hired on a timely basis. So it didn't take people a year to get hired. We actually were able to hire them within 3 months of being called for the test. And I'm happy to say that from that process in 2019, we increased people of color on our eligibility list by 60%. And when you look at the new rec leaders, we've been able to hire 26 of them off that list. They are incredibly diverse, not just from a racial standpoint, but their inclination towards the work is amazingly positive. And so we feel like we got this right on a number of different levels. So we just are going through the same process now, since that list is expiring, to do that whole process again. And I really do believe that we're changing the face of the recreation leader, for the future in Parks and Rec. So we're still going to continue to work on it, but it's definitely something that we're proud of. The other question about programming and Parks and Recreation being a key around anti-violence programming, I mean, we agree 150%. And I totally agree with you that, we've learned a lesson over the last 11 months. When you significantly reduce a budget and we lost with that reduction in budget, we lost, 1,200 seasonal positions. That included the pool staff, but also after school program staff and summer camp staff. And that meant those people were out of work. So those people come from these communities. So when you have, a lack of jobs and a lack of when you close rec centers and take down rims of basketball courts, and kids aren't in school, it's a recipe for some really negative implications. And I think we've seen that. So we have to, and I have a presentation that I'm giving as part of the next resolution that I hope will demonstrate what we've tried to do over the last year to turn that tide, right, amidst a pandemic, and what we're committed to do moving forward for the summer. We're planning a massive summer with a lot of partners. Councilman Johnson, I totally agree with you that, the more we can get the word out and the more that you and your colleagues can help us to tell these community organizations that we welcome them into these recreation centers. We have the space, we have the kids. We want them to come in and help us program these centers. Not every program needs to be run by a recreation leader. We can permit space, and we do at every facility, to have people come in and use those facilities to help support their own programs and to do their own outreach. We welcome that, and we want to support that in any way that we can. That was a long answer.
No, that was the answer that I was looking for in terms of information. And then again, I just want to circle back regarding the $12 million that was cut. And we'll have an opportunity to do a deeper dive during the budget hearing to look at what, and you touched on it, but again, the type of staffing that was cut, the impact that it has on programming, and the impact it even had on capital improvements and because that's a role. Because if you don't have, the reason why I rebuilt about 95% of every rec center inside the second councilman's district is because as a kid, if we wanted to go to a nice park, we didn't go in the neighborhood. I grew up in Point Breeze, but we would go over to Markwood, which we call Taneyville, because it was just a better playground as opposed to staying at Chew Playground. But even though I did go to Chew Playground for summer camp and still did enjoy myself, but the nicer playgrounds were in other areas, right? That were more fluid. And so we'll do a deeper dive regarding this budget. Again, I support what Madam Chair said as relates to the administration, looking at, okay, if there are COVID relief funds that are coming, and they are coming, more than $1 billion over 2 years, right? How is that funding prioritizing from a gun violence strategy standpoint, young people who participate in parks and rec? And I'll wrap up on this. I was at Wharton Square Park yesterday with my two sons. It was a beautiful day. Picked them up from school. Okay, let's just go hang out. Let them enjoy themselves, right? And again, and there were other kids who were also playing over there, other parents as well. And it just reiterates how critically important it is that, one, we have safe places for our young people to enjoy themselves, as well as families, because it was a family day as well. And so, I was thinking about, I grew up in South Philly, but now I'm a dad and I got my two sons with me. I'm paying attention, right, just to make sure nothing really kicks off. I got my eyes open. I'm a little more alert than I normally was. But again, this is why it's critically important that I think all of us are talking about the issue of safety inside our recreation centers, inside our playgrounds, as well as our parks. And so thank you, Madam Chair, for your time. Commissioner, I look forward to doing additional follow-up regarding the key areas around the budget, and again, making sure our young people are safe on this upcoming summer. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilman. Thank you for your comments and questions. Very important information that we were able to garner from your questioning, particularly around staffing and what the history was, what's being done now, and how we can proceed to really engage folks who otherwise might not have been engaged. So thank you so much, Councilman. Thank you, Commissioner.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
If you don't mind, I just want to add one last part to my comment as well. Commissioner, I just want to also see if you and your team, as time goes along, can look at, like, diversity in hiring is one thing, but also cultural sensitivity, right? That the staff people who are placed inside, because a lot of them through civil service, they have degrees, and the neighborhood people don't have those degrees, so they probably can't move up, but the neighborhood people are the backbone. And so it's like the person with the degree that doesn't come from the neighborhood kind of coming and changing, if I can say it, kind of gentrifying what recreational center programming look like. I'm just going to be up front and just say that. And so there's a cultural sensitivity standpoint, because if you have programming that doesn't reflect the indigenous people that live inside the neighborhood who always live there, but you have programs that are geared more toward new residents that live inside the area, like that's a problem. And so it's something that I pay attention to. But I think in terms of a park and rec system, something that could also be incorporated into how y'all bring people on and inform them from a cultural sensitivity standpoint that if you're going in someone else's neighborhood, if they like basketball, support them doing basketball. They like hip hop, let them do hip hop. They want to do African drumming, let them do African drumming. Everybody don't want to do basket weaving, right? And so those are the type things that I believe when people are hired, regardless of, in terms of their background, to think about. And no different than if somebody from South Philadelphia who's African American somehow wind up in the Northeast. Okay. Oh, they may play hockey. They may play soccer, right? They may play baseball, right? And I'm quite sure that the neighbors and the parents would want somebody to come in and totally just change it up and say, well, everybody's playing basketball and we don't do those other types of programming. So just wanted to put that out there from a staffing and programming standpoint. And Commissioner, you take care. Keep up the good work. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Councilman. Thanks again. Councilwoman Jamie Gauthier, Chair recognizes Councilman Gauthier.
I don't have anything, Madam Chair. I think that was an old.
Oh, okay. All right. Very good. Okay. Is there anyone else who would like to offer testimony or make a statement regarding resolution number 210199? Just double check the chat. I don't see anyone. So that being said, Madam Clerk, could we have you read the title of the next resolution?
I apologize. I have my hand up for testimony.
Oh, I do apologize.
Okay. I apologize for late raising my hand.
Okay, thank you. Please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
My name is Brett Bessler. I am a Recreation Leader 1 and Shop Steward for DC 47 Local 2187 within the Philadelphia Parks and Recreation System. First, I would like to thank the committee for discussing this crucial initiative of camera installations for our playground and recreation centers. Additionally, I would like to also thank the committee for providing this avenue for rank and file 2187 members to provide their own personal experiences when it comes to this initiative. As I said before, I'm a recreation leader for PPR and facilitate a playground and rec center in the Point Breeze neighborhood of South Philadelphia. Every day, our facility and staff volunteers work tirelessly to provide a welcoming and vibrant public space for our community. Children can play on our state-of-the-art play equipment, teens can enjoy and grow through our youth development programming, and seniors can sit back and relax to the sounds of an outdoor jazz ensemble basking in the glow of a South Philadelphia sunset. On the evening of May 19th, 2019, an evening much like I just described, our sacred community space was invaded by sounds of gunfire. As the only staff on site, I immediately did what I was trained to do in an active shooter situation. I secured my after-school children in our safe room, went on lockdown, and called the police. Fortunately, when the shooting occurred, no one was struck by any bullets, but as the chaos of roughly 80 citizens running from our playground ensued, staff was unable to obtain much information about the actual incident or persons involved. When police arrived, I informed them of the little information I personally knew and took them to review our playground security footage. Within moments, PPD were able to have a full description of those involved and the vehicle that they fled in. The suspects were later apprehended and charged thanks to our security systems footage. Throughout the years with PPR, I have grown to learn how invaluable this extra set of 24/7 eyes can be. Not because of my experience with the positive effects of having security cameras, but my experiences with not having them has been harrowing, to say the least. One example, one evening in just my second year of working with PPR at a recreation center in Northwest Philadelphia, roughly 30 youth began to chase two individuals throughout our park and into our facility. This group caught up with these two individuals in our main hallway and began beating them, kicking and punching these two youth as they tried to shield their heads from the blows. I, again, working alone, called emergency response, and after what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 10 to 15 seconds of pleading for them just to stop, they all ran from the facility, including the two individuals that were bloodied from just being attacked. When emergency response arrived, I did my best to share as much information as I could, but because we did not have security cameras, there was not much we could do. All I wanted to do that night was help those 2 youth that were attacked to the best of my ability, but because we did not have the information a security camera system could provide, we were unable to identify anyone involved or were even able to answer the simple question of which way did they go. It is my hope that those 2 youth do not see that facility as a constant reminder of this traumatic event, but I can understand why they would. I and my fellow coworkers look forward to the day when we will have security systems at all of our playgrounds and recreation centers. There is no downside to having this base level of security for our community spaces. Security cameras can help deter crime, but really show their true value when our public spaces are disrupted by acts of violence. With these systems, we can ensure an adequate level of response to these incidents and the communities we are tasked with keeping safe. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for your testimony. It's right on point with exactly why we wanted to have this hearing, which is to find out what missed opportunities, for lack of better terms, were there with cameras not being in place. And I think that what you spoke about, the incident that you spoke about, in which there was one with cameras and one without, really just puts it out there. It lays all the information bare that we need cameras. These cameras are not optional. I think that, if we had cameras in place when we had expected to have cameras in place, then the incident which you described with the 2 young people being attacked, we would have been able to address that. We would have been able to figure out who it was, what happened, who the culprits were, identify them, and address it appropriately. So when I say that there needs to be a sense of urgency around placing these cameras, it's not to attack anyone or to put anyone on the spot, but it is to say that this is an important safety feature that is long overdue in our parks and recreation system. So thank you for your testimony today.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Is there anyone else here to testify on Resolution 210199? And I don't see any hands raised or any information in the chat. So if we could have Madam Clerk call the next resolution and witnesses to testify.
So Resolution 210198, a resolution authorizing the Committee of Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Affairs to hold hearings to obtain an update on the status of the city's plan to ensure all parks or playgrounds owned or controlled by the City of Philadelphia are inclusive, intergenerational, and accessible for all disabilities and special needs. And the first panel is Aparna Palantino, Deputy Commissioner for Capital Infrastructure and Natural Lands Management of the Department of Parks and Recreation, and Catherine Ott-Lovell, Commissioner of the Departments of Parks and Recreation.
Very good. If we could have you ladies state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Aparna Palantino. Good morning, Chairperson Bass and members of the Committee on Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Affairs. My name is Aparna Palantino, and I serve as the Deputy Commissioner of Parks and Recreation for Capital Infrastructure and Natural Lands Management. With me today is Commissioner Catherine Ott-Lovell, who will testify on our department's COVID-19 general reopening plans as requested by this committee. In terms of process, I will first testify on behalf of our department on the subject of resolution number 210198, the status of our parks and playgrounds with regards to inclusivity, intergenerational features, and accessibility for individuals with disabilities and special needs. Since 2016, 54 of our playgrounds across all city council districts have undergone some form of accessibility renovations. The specific listing of these 54 playground sites with detailed inclusivity highlights has been provided to this committee as an Excel spreadsheet labeled Installed Playgrounds List since 2016. We are proud of the work we've accomplished over the past 5 years to ensure that our playgrounds are accessible for all users, but clearly more work needs to be done to bring all parks and recreation playgrounds up to acceptable accessibility standards. Additional City Council and capital funding is critical to accomplish this important goal. With regards to the intergenerational facilities, we work in close partnership with council members and communities to identify the type of adult fitness equipment or features desired at each site. Our department is also working to create an inclusion service delivery design for all of our playgrounds to better serve and build inclusive programming for all individuals with disabilities. This delivery design includes program assessments, professional development for staff, as well as the creation of new program standards for neurodiversity. Through these efforts, our program would shift from place-based support to system-wide support and programming for differently abled individuals. Inclusivity at all of our playgrounds remains the department's goal. We're committed to working with City Council to both identify priority sites and secure funding as needed. To this end, we have formed new partnerships with a wide variety of entities, including Jefferson Hospital Occupational Therapy, the Eagles Autism Challenge, and the Mayor's Office of Diversity and Inclusion. Funding and physical site constraints remain our two biggest challenges to successfully overcoming inclusivity and accessibility obstacles for all citizens. At the conclusion of the second part of this testimony by Commissioner Outlevel on our COVID-19 reopening plans and trainings, I would be happy to answer any questions on the details of inclusive playgrounds. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. If we could now hear from the Commissioner.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner, do you have testimony?
Yes, ma'am. Good morning,
Okay,
members of the committee. Sorry, I was just pulling it up.
That's all right.
Good morning, members of the committee. My name is Catherine Ott-Level, and I'm the Commissioner of the Department of Parks and Recreation. As specifically requested, I'm here today to present information on our department's 2020 and 2021 COVID-19 reopening plans, as well as standard operating procedures and protocols. I would call to your attention to the previously provided information labeled 4-9 Parks and Recreation reopenings and COVID protocols as submitted to Council. First, we are proud to report that all parks were open and remain so during the pandemic. We trained 83 social distancing ambassadors to distribute masks, COVID-19 safety cards, and to track usage and trash in our parks throughout the pandemic. Second, all playgrounds and basketball courts are open for the public for use. Third, we are planning for a full complement of summer programming, and we plan to offer 120 summer camps at least citywide from July 6th through August 13th. Fourth, it is our hope that all pools will open on time this summer after the normal necessary maintenance work is completed and over 400 lifeguards are hired to staff those pools. We will also operate over 300 play streets and open over 100 spray grounds. Last, since September of 2020, 40 of our recreation centers have been serving as access centers, which provide safe online learning experiences as virtual classrooms for those children in need of internet access. I would like to now quickly highlight some slides in a PowerPoint, a pandemic year in review. The main theme of our work and our accomplishments as a department will clearly show that Parks and Recreation is an essential service provider, particularly for communities of color, for educational access, recreation, athletics, meals, outdoor exercise, and other key life amenities. I'm going to pull up that presentation. Bear with me. Can people see this? Maybe someone could let me know.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So this is just a presentation to give everyone a sense of what Parks and Rec has been doing throughout the pandemic and what our plans are in the near future. So does everyone see a screen that says a pandemic year in review?
I have a blank screen. I don't have that.
You don't have that, okay. Can IT, because I see it up on my screen.
I see it now.
Okay, great. So just let me know if you don't see this continually. So this is so in March of 2020, when the mayor before COVID hit our city and our world, we were poised to receive a very historic for us increase, a programmatic increase in our FY21 budget. In the mayor's budget address. So we were very excited, and that was going to allow us to begin to implement our realigning as we rebuild new staffing structure. However, COVID then hit our city, and with all of the revenue cuts and that we were faced with, as we all know, the city introduced a new budget in May, and that budget cut our funding by a full 20%. So our capital budget was also reduced. We lost thousands of seasonal positions, which included some pool positions because the pool season was canceled, the Dell season was canceled. We had to reduce our mowing cycles. We eliminated full programs, including our computer labs, as well as our workforce development program. However, I want to be clear that Parks and Recreation staff never stopped working. We assigned our staff, all of our recreation leaders, to work at the city's food warehouse, where they spent hours every single day on shifts packing food boxes. We then turned 14 recreation centers into food pantries, where these boxes were distributed to communities every single day. Almost 100,000 food boxes were distributed at our recreation centers, and those boxes were packed by recreation leaders at the city's food warehouse. We also continued to do meal distribution at our recreation centers every day because children were not receiving those meals at schools. We continued to give out meals at our older adult centers, and we assigned our staff to work at schools distributing meals there as well. We distributed a total of 50,000 meals through the older adult centers and over 1 million meals through the recreation centers. As we know, we saw a massive increase in park usage during COVID-19. We estimate, based on the trash that we've picked up, that there was about a 50% increase in visitors to park. We saw a 1,300% increase in bike and recreational traffic along MLK Drive. And we had a wonderful program, as I mentioned, where we actually trained our staff. So people who could not work where they were assigned to work, like our water safety instructors and some of our recreation leaders and our assistant recreation leaders, we trained them to become social distance ambassadors, to distribute free face masks and information to park users. I'm being told my slides aren't moving. Is that right?
They aren't moving, Catherine.
Okay.
Correct.
Can you see it now? Are they moving now?
The first slide is still up.
Okay.
The cover.
They're moving on my screen. Are they moving? What do you see now? Sorry, everybody. It's so complicated.
Actually,
okay. Do you see it now?
No.
It just changed.
I do.
It just changed.
I think I was doing it wrong. I think that's my fault, guys. I was doing it on my computer and not in the team. So hopefully this will work now. So this is the slide I was just talking about. Does everyone see this? It's a gentleman with his dog.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So this outlines everything I just talked about in terms of some of the cuts that we took when the budget was revised. This demonstrates the response in terms of food access and our recreation leaders and other staff working at the food warehouse. And then this is the slide where I was speaking about the increase in park usage, the closure of MLK Drive, and the social distance ambassador campaign. We also had a huge effort to get signage installed around our system like we've never had to do before. So making sure that people who were using the parks understood, what the protocols needed to be. So mask wearing, social distancing, hand sanitizing. We put up laminated signs, and this was all hands on deck. Everybody on our team was out there putting up signs in English and in Spanish. We ended up using lawn signs, which was very effective for the parks, and just made sure that everybody knew what to do. We also took down 800 basketball rims at one point and then had to put them all back up, which was a massive effort for our skilled trades team. And then our staff were absolutely incredible. And Brett Bessler, who testified just a few minutes ago, has been a great partner in this. And that is a virtual programming initiative. And are these still not moving? Anyone? Is anyone watching?
I see slide 6.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we started something called Parks and Rec at Home, which is a virtual programming initiative that we had almost 300 staff participate in. This was a way for staff while, people were at home, children and families were at home, was a way for our staff to stay connected to families, but also to demonstrate, some interest that they had, and to host programs that could keep young people and older people engaged. And this was a hugely popular program. And then we moved into summer, and we knew that working with the Office of Children and Families and so many partners, that we needed to have a robust summer for kids, even in the midst of a pandemic. And so we made the really difficult decision to continue to host summer camps. And we did that. We hosted 100 summer camps for almost 2,000 campers. We opened 105 spray grounds, and we did this lockstep with the Department of Health, making sure we had appropriate procedures in place. I'm very proud to say that we only had one confirmed COVID case during the last week of camp in all of those camps. We also employed teenagers during the pandemic. Much of the work-ready positions in the city went virtual last summer, but at Parks and Rec, we actually physically hired 769 teenagers to work at our summer camps. We also got positions through another program called SLIP, where we were able to hire 19 to 24-year-old, 175 19 to 24-year-olds from the communities to work at our play streets and at our camps. So our play streets are a very unique thing to Philadelphia in that they have been a meal distribution program for about 50 years. It's a way that we get meals to individuals, to children, right where they live. And this year we knew that, because some families would not feel comfortable sending their children to summer camp, but that kids had been, really just virtual learning for months and had been on their own, without social interaction for months, that we felt that we could, use play streets as a vehicle to bring recreation to children where they were. And so we decided that we would amplify and enhance our play streets this summer as a way to bring fun to kids on their blocks, in addition to the meals. So as many of you know, volunteers apply for their street to become a play street. And once it's approved, they can close that street between 10 and 4 every day. And we deliver meals. Only this summer, we partnered with dozens and dozens of partners to bring real play to these streets. Every street received a variety of kits, sports kits, art kits, reading kits, play packs, to engage the children, and so that the play street supervisors and volunteers had a way to engage with children in a really fun way. We also provided cooling kits to 150 streets. Now remember, our pools were closed, so we knew that people would be looking for ways to keep cool. And so we had these giant blue bins that we filled with patio umbrellas, pop-up tents, water balloons, personalized misting fans, and super soakers for every kid. And we also worked with the fire department and the water department to have the fire hydrants open safely on those blocks. On 50 streets that we identified as super play streets, we used a racial equity lens and an equity lens to look at what streets had the highest rates of poverty and violence. And we identified those streets to be super streets, which means not only did they get those kits that we were talking about, they also received daily programs with partners like the Special Olympics, Mural Arts, Clay Studio, the Junior Barbershop Academy. And then on Fridays, these blocks had dance parties with local DJs and local vendors. Again, just a fun way to keep kids engaged this summer. Everything was free. And then we worked with a firm, a local firm, and also a firm in Los Angeles to build these wobbles, which were these interlocking play structures that could be moved from street to street. And the wobbles were just a really fun way to get kids active and to give them something really cool right out front, right outside their door. And we also delivered seesaws to the street and other types of playful learning physical structures. And we moved them from street to street with a big truck. And we raised all the funding for play streets privately over the course of about 5 weeks this time last year. And these were all of the partners that helped us be able to do that. And then once summer was over, we moved right into the fall. And that meant once we knew that children would be home learning and some children could not stay at home safely, we knew that we had to provide space for them to learn in recreation centers. And that was a massive lift for us and our staff. And I give such tremendous credit to our staff and all of the out of school time providers that are partnering with us on this, and the Office of Children and Families who have been leading this initiative. So we opened 40 virtual learning centers, access centers in recreation centers. We are not just providing the safe space for learning, but we're providing fun activities, meals, and snacks for those thousands of children every single day. We also did something really great last summer, which were drive-in movies. There were a lot of groups doing drive-in movies like at the Navy Yard, but they were expensive. And so we decided, because we have a screen, we could do it for free. And so we partnered with T-Mobile and Netflix and The Man, and we had 25 free movie nights in that parking lot last summer. It was a lot of fun and a great way for families to, again, just do something safe outdoors amidst the pandemic. We also introduced the very first ever esports program. We believe it's the first esports program nationally in a Parks and Recreation department. We partnered with the local firm Nerd Street Gamers to kick off the first tournament for esports at our recreation sites, and it was really successful. A great way to get teenagers especially involved. This was a free way for kids to engage in a tournament, win prizes that were given to us by the Sixers Youth Foundation, and we hope to really expand on this esports partnership in more of our centers moving forward. In January, as things, began to open up a little bit after the fall surge in COVID cases, we opened up 35 of our gyms for permitted programs and also to support the school district's winter sports initiative. And then in February, we opened up all 5 of our ice rinks, and we maximized public skates, and we saw a huge interest in our public skates and our programs at the ice rinks, again, because families and people were looking for things to do. And then in March, finally, we were able to open our 5 older adult centers. We had been opening them for meals every single day, but this allowed us to reopen them for programming safely. And then just this past Monday, we resumed public programs at 117 of our rec centers, which are now open from 12 to 8 every single day. And our fields, our rec centers, and picnic areas have been and are continue to be open for permitting. And then what we're planning for summer, and I know that the Office of Children and Families are planning a much more detailed outline of what's going to happen this summer in the city for children. But just to give an overview of what we're planning for, we are planning for pool openings. So we are actively recruiting lifeguards. We need to hire 400 lifeguards in order to open pools safely this summer. And we are doing screenings because we don't have access to the school district's indoor pool. We are doing screenings at an outdoor pool, which we have filled and heated, which is, again, pretty innovative, but out of desperation. And that's where we're doing screenings in an outdoor heated pool in Port Richmond so that we can get these lifeguards screened and certified. We are planning to open at least 120 summer camps. We're planning to run over 300 play streets, and again, planning to open all of our spray grounds. We're going to have a very heavy focus on teen programming this summer. From not just the employment opportunities, we hope to hire over 1,000 teens through the Work Ready program. We're the largest provider of teen jobs in the city. But we also hope to partner with a lot of different organizations to offer teen entrepreneurship programs, conflict resolution and de-escalation programs, structured athletic leagues, as well as what we did 2 summers ago, which was very successful, our Cops and Rec movie nights at centers. And then again, we'll continue to offer youth and young adult employment opportunities at our pools, at our camps, and at our play streets. And we say all this just to say that, again, I know we've sort of beat the drum on this today, but we do believe that Parks and Recreation is absolutely an essential service. We believe that we've demonstrated that second to none over the last 10 months, and we want to continue to provide that essential service as a tool for equitable COVID recovery and, of course, violence prevention. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for the presentation. It wasn't a part of the original request from the resolution, but I do think it was very important information. It was a very thorough presentation. We weren't expecting that level of detail, but I do appreciate it, and I thank you because I think that it gave us a lot of information that we didn't have before in terms of what was going to be happening. And I'd love to, if you could send that document over as a PDF so that we could circulate it to other members of council.
Yeah, I believe Sabrina already has that. Yes.
Say again?
I think Sabrina has that.
Okay, very good,
yes.
Very good. Okay, so I want to go back to the inclusivity of the playgrounds. And I went through the document that was provided in terms of what neighborhoods had received or what centers had received, various services and work to make them more inclusive for those with disabilities. And I can tell you that from the first district, which is Councilman Squilla, it looks like from your chart that you provided, there were 6 sites The 2nd District, Councilman Johnson, there were 7. The 3rd District, which is Councilwoman Gauthier, there was 1. In the 4th District, which is Councilman Jones, there were 6. In the 5th District, which is Council President Clark, there were 7. In the 6th District, which is Councilman Bobby Heenan, there were 9. In the 7th District, which is Councilwoman Sanchez, there were 9. In the 8th District, which is my district, there were 3. In the 9th District, which is Councilwoman Parker, there was 1. And in the 10th District, Councilman O'Neill, there were 6 sites that received some form of inclusivity to make the centers, more welcoming to those with disabilities and intergenerational. And I noticed that when I looked at it by region, that Northwest Philadelphia combined received significantly less than all other parts of the city. And I'm wondering if you can address that.
Certainly, Councilwoman, these were not based on anything other than capital projects that had been performed in those areas. So since 2016, these are the larger capital improvements that have been funded by various council members in their districts. And they range from anything from just a safety surface replacement up to a full playground replacement. It's just based on all of the capital projects performed during that time.
So I just want to push back a little bit because I know I have a number of capital projects that have been waiting in the wings for quite some time. And, I don't see that reflected here.
I believe that the ones that you have, we've had Pleasant Playground was done prior to that, of course, or just around then. Stenton Park was recently completed, which contains all of the features mentioned here. I know you have several very large projects that are currently in design that are to go into construction very soon. So that number will likely jump up very drastically.
Okay. I think it would be helpful if you could provide the information, if you could provide it by council district, and Certainly. Also if you could provide what also was pending. So that we can have a good sense of what else is, in the pipeline.
Certainly.
Okay. One moment. Let me just, I'm just multitasking here. I had some prepared questions that I wanted to ask. 1 second. Okay. And, I see that we received a response to a number of the questions that we did submit in advance. For the record, I see that you noted 54 playgrounds have received some form of renovation. The nature of these improvements is very different. It varies from location to location. I see. Okay. And so there were a number of different questions that were asked by the committee that you answered. We'll make these questions available, these answers to the questions available to the committee. Okay, so I'm going to open it up for questions. If any member has any questions regarding the inclusion of equipment for seniors, for those who have some form of disability, other physical changes that would make it easier for those with a disability. Let's say if I have a child in a wheelchair and a child that is mobile, and I want to take both of them to the playground. I want to make sure that there's things for both of my children to be able to do. I'd like to see more of this or that. And so we look forward to providing information to you in terms of what we are going to be requesting from Parks and Rec. But are there any questions from members of the committee? Okay, I don't see any. All right, so what we'll do now is move to our panel 2. If panel 1 could just hang around, Aparna and Commissioner, if you could hang around for a moment. Panel 2 is Jesse Jordan, or Madam Clerk, if you could read or call up the next panel.
Yes, I'm here, Madam Chair. This is Jesse Jordan.
Okay, Mr. Jordan, please state your name for the record and begin with your testimony.
Sure. My name is Jesse Jordan. For the record, thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony on behalf of ASME District Council 47, Local 2187, in regards to Resolution 210198. I'm here today to advocate for this population and hopefully provide an opportunity to be of assistance to the Parks and Recs in the community and the families that we service by reinstating or bringing to your attention the recreational therapist job class that was once abolished. Since we are increasing the accessibility of city-owned or controlled parks and playgrounds, why not further increase their quality of life by reinstating the recreational therapist job class? Recreational therapists will conduct interviews to assess clients' needs, interests, and physical capabilities in order to facilitate planning of activities, in-house recreational activities, and field trips based on the assess interests and capabilities of individuals with special emphasis on reality-oriented activities. Each person would have their own established goals and progress would be continually monitored. They would observe their clients' participation or therefore planned activities, encourage participation in activities, particularly loners, isolated, or depressed persons, attend clients' care plan conferences with staff members representing a variety of departments in order to integrate recreational therapy plans with other aspects of total client care. Recreational therapists would also plan special group activities such as birthday parties, holiday celebrations, plan and arrange outings and shopping sprees, sighting tours, various interests. Having a strong social life may reduce health problems, including depression, likely resulting in clients living longer. We believe that if we had a recreational therapist as part of Parks and Recs as we once did, that this will bring this population, make them more part of the community, get them more active, and have a place they can call their own and address their special needs. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your testimony. I'd like to have a comment from the commissioner on this matter.
Sure. I think it was mentioned in Aparna's testimony that we're currently undergoing a process around a full inclusion plan. So, Chairwoman Bass, your bill that you introduced around inclusive playgrounds and was, I think, really formative in a lot of ways that has really helped to inform our work, but not just from a capital perspective, but from a programming perspective. It's really it's just one step to make sure that physically our sites are inclusive, right? The next step is really to make sure that the programming is inclusive and that our staff are trained to be able to work with any population with any needs that come to our sites. And historically at Parks and Rec, our response has been that we have Carousel House. But I have learned from a few years now working with the inclusion community and inclusion advocates that that's no longer appropriate. That's not enough. We can't tell people of various needs, who live in the Northwest or live in the Northeast that, if you want programs for your population or your needs, you have to go to this place in West Park. That's not appropriate. So what we decided to do was to engage. We did an RFP. We had a great team of consultants. We raised some money. We did an RFP, a great team of consultants who responded, led by a group called Carousel Connections and the Special Olympics, and then Jefferson University Center for Neurodiversity. So they're leading an inclusion plan for us. They're working with our staff and community stakeholders, and we hope in the next month or so to be able to unveil an inclusion plan that gives us the strategy moving forward for what our department needs to bring inclusion services in terms of programs to everything we do. So what staffing do we need? This recreational therapist position is one tool in that toolbox. What kind of coordination do we need with other agencies and organizations that are experts in this work? What kind of training do our existing staff need? I don't want to say that it's only a recreational therapist or it's only this person that can support people. We can all support people because we can all be trained. We had our first inclusion summit at the kickoff of this plan last year. We actually had it in partnership with the Eagles at Lincoln Financial Field, and it was a tremendous success. It was a training for all of our staff, and so now that was to really embark on this inclusion plan. And once we have this inclusion plan finalized, we will need the funding to implement that plan. But I think it's really important to have that strategy and have those experts help to inform that. And we certainly think that the recreation therapist position could be one tool in that work. But I thank you for your leadership, because I think, really, if you will, mandating that physically these changes needed to happen really helped us to think beyond that, right? To think what's next. Now that we know that this investment is being made physically, what can we do programmatically to make sure that, that we're serving people of every need and every ability in the best way possible?
That's great. That's great, because it's so important that everyone have an opportunity to participate. Let me ask you a question, just piggybacking off of the last question from Mr. Jordan, but slightly different. How has the department sought the input of people with disabilities before, during, and after designing or renovating its parks and recreations and playgrounds?
I can take that, Councilwoman. So whenever we embark on a design, we do work very closely with the council office and community to identify specific patrons of our facilities that may have different needs. In the past year, we've attended about 5 trainings, our staff, on how to incorporate inclusive design. There isn't a formal code book, if you will. So we've attended just this past year 5 trainings and many before that, working with playground professionals who specialize in inclusive play equipment and site amenities. And we take all of that knowledge during the design and incorporate it and then present it to the community. We're certain to work with council offices to, as I mentioned, identify particular families that may have very specific challenges. And some of the photographs presented in response to those questions will show that, whether it's a child that is in a wheelchair, it could be photosensitivity. There's a variety of different needs based on a community. So we're very mindful to ensure that those families are brought to the table. We work through our advisory councils and again, through community meetings to present those designs and get feedback before we actually implement them.
I would also suggest that you work with some providers of disability services, such as Liberty Resources. I think they're great. They do a fantastic job of connecting with the disability community and ensuring that they are at the table on things of this, things like this. So I think you should reach out to them, and also we can, locate some other providers that are out here that are doing so much work to make sure that the disability community in Philadelphia is included every step of the way. And that's certainly what our intention is here too.
Absolutely.
So I would certainly encourage you to do that. Commissioner, did you have a comment on that, or?
No, Aparna's team, they work incredibly hard. And I remember one incident where we had a woman who reached out about a playground in the Northeast, and her daughter had sight impairments, and it was not a capital improvement. It was some just basic things that her daughter needed, and Aparna staff went out to meet, along with the program staff, to meet with this family one-on-one to talk about what the little girl needed and how we could help with things like putting tape down, to help her see steps of the play equipment. And I got a letter back from the mom that was just so impressed that she reached out, to Aparna's team and asked for, or reached out to the rec leader who reached out to Aparna's team. And then they actually came out to meet with her, one-on-one to make those accommodations. And, we'll continue to do that. I think it is about just listening and being available. And as I said, making sure that staff understand at that grassroots level, that we want to be as responsive as possible.
Another quick question. Can you talk about, just going over the list that you provided to us, can you talk about the fact that there's 16 parks and playgrounds with inclusive adult fitness areas out of the 54 that were that received some form of renovation? Can you tell us why that is? Because I would think that's something you could do in all 54.
So the 16 sites listed have specific adult fitness equipment, not necessarily inclusive equipment for adults. So I just would like to clarify that distinction.
Say it again, I'm sorry.
So the 16 sites that are mentioned in the response are sites with adult fitness equipment, actual structures.
Yeah.
That doesn't, it's not necessarily the only sites with inclusive adult opportunities. So I just want to make the distinction.
I don't know what you mean. I'm sorry, I don't know what you mean.
Each of those pieces of equipment, of course, is inclusive, but there are other amenities available at sites for adults with disabilities.
Okay.
It may be a walking track. It might be other things within that.
Okay.
It could be game tables with different opportunities, picnic spots.
So you're saying that the 16 sites with adult and fitness areas, that there is some equipment that's specifically designed for adults, and then there are other amenities that they could use as well. Is that what you mean?
The other sites have amenities that they can use as well. The 16 have what we call that exercise equipment, for lack, just to maybe provide some clarity. So 16 sites have structures that are specifically intended for fitness, adult fitness. The remaining sites have other opportunities as well. So there's more than 16 sites in our system that have opportunity for inclusive adult fitness.
Can we have a list of what those sites are and a breakdown of what those opportunities are?
Certainly.
That would be great.
Sure. And I'm sorry, those 16 sites were developed in working with different council members and communities on what type of equipment they would like to have at the facility, because different communities have requested different types of equipment in the past.
Okay. And can you tell me what other renovations have been made in these parks to support adults that may have behavioral disabilities and mental disorders?
So in terms of site improvements, whenever we undertake a capital project, we try to provide different levels of spaces. So there's the very active zones, and then there are other passive zones that surround these areas. So we're very mindful to create different zones of access. Where possible, we try to create a defined perimeter. We try to create paths that are easy to navigate for folks. It's one of the recommendations for people with different abilities to provide. You don't just put someone in a playground. You clearly delineate different zones so they're able to choose what they're comfortable with. So that's at the basis of every design that we've undertaken recently.
Very good. And my last question is, Commissioner, can you talk about some of the programming that is surrounding the disability equipment that's coming in? As you mentioned earlier, it's not just enough to have the equipment, but to have the programming to go with it. Can you talk about some of the programming you all have developed to make sure that the public is aware of what's out there and what you all are doing?
Sure. So Aparna can probably speak to this more, but our staff have been trained on the use of the equipment. So when the equipment comes to a site, we want to make sure that our recreation staff know how to use it, so that if you're a mom and you're walking up to a site, it can be a little intimidating to look at that fitness equipment if you don't know how to use it, and so the idea is to have staff there who have, with the manufacturer, with the vendor, been trained around what it is and what you can do on it, so that when they have families out there at the site, they can explain to them and even hold classes, as to here's what you can do with the equipment, so that it sort of breaks down that intimidation factor. That's something that we've heard from communities, like, oh, it looks good, but I don't really know what to do with it,
Right.
So.
Right.
It's like important. We have the signage up, which is good, but it still can be intimidating. So that's been really important. Another program that we've done, which I think and our staff has led and been really involved with, which is very low cost and low maintenance, is called the We Walk program. Have you heard of this?
No. Please.
Yeah, it's awesome. And it's beloved by these communities. It's sort of taken on a life of its own. It's very simple. We've done it in partnership with the Conservancy for the past, I guess, maybe 3 or 4 years. It's just a walking group. And our staff, it's led initially by our staff, right? And then we coordinate with volunteers in the community, and there's just a set time and a set route around the perimeter of the site where the group walks, and they get t-shirts and it says "We Walk." And there's a group that they meet at passive parks, so it's a lot of our parks that don't have staff, so our stewardship staff goes out and leads the We Walks. And then Cobbs Creek, Clark Park, FDR Park, but then at our recreation centers it's picked up a lot of traction too. And it's just an easy way to, especially for older adults and seniors, it's a really easy way to get them out doing things that are social and safe, but very low impact.
Well, Commissioner, I would just advise that as the chair of Parks and Rec, I had no idea, but I would love to be able to know when these are happening so that I can participate with my constituents. So if you could make sure that every member of council gets a list of when these activities are taking place, I'm sure that members would love to be out and to have an opportunity to connect and dialogue with people from the community and walk alongside. So if you could get that information.
A great idea. We can definitely do that. Yeah, it's a great idea.
Thank you so much. And I'm just going to check the chat again. We have a question from Councilwoman Brooks.
Hi, yeah, I was wondering if there's on your website, is there a listing of all the inclusive recreation or not just the parts, but the equipment and how to use it? So if a family was opting to take their child out and they might just was looking because they go on, see where equipment is and know how to use it before they get there.
That's a great suggestion. I don't think that's there yet. Am I right, Aparna? I don't think
that's
we have
correct.
That, but we can definitely do that.
We're actually working on diagramming that with our GIS folks and populating the information, because there's a certain list of amenities that families, especially with children with special needs or even adults with special needs, look for when going to a site. Things like parking, bathrooms, availability of water, and then the equipment and the facilities themselves. So we're working on diagramming that on a plan that we can put up on our website, but we have to do a thorough assessment to ensure that we're able to provide all of those other amenities as well. So we are actually in the process of doing that.
Okay, and earlier, I don't know who spoke on, but someone spoke on the needs of having recreation therapists available. This would be a perfect job for a rec therapist intern or a rec therapist to do. I have to speak up for rec therapists because you guys know that I am a rec therapist. So, I think it would be good if it's something that folks could just look up and be prepared to use as needed. And diagrammed out. This is primarily for seniors. This is, folks who have mobility issues. This is for the visually impaired. I think it would draw more folks to our parks. And also, a good way to include that community even more into this whole life of Parks and Rec. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. And I think that was an excellent suggestion that you just made around having a master list, so to speak, of what's out there, what's in the universe here in Philadelphia. If I have, family members or children with disabilities, and I want to take them out for a recreational experience and a day at the center, where should I go? What should I do? I also want to strongly encourage Parks and Rec to put it on the website, but put it in written form as well. I'd love a booklet or a handout in writing that I could display in my office, and my district office especially, as people come in, that they could pick it up and browse it and be aware and know. Everybody's not going to go to the website. Everybody doesn't have web access. In a lot of my district, they don't. But we want to make sure that they get this information into their hands. And it's another handout that we could provide to them in terms of services that are available to the city of Philadelphia. Excellent question, Councilwoman Brooks. I don't see any additional questions. Is there anyone else here that would like to testify? Okay, seeing none. Okay, so this concludes the hearing on resolution number 210198 and 210199. I want to thank everyone for attending today, and everyone have a great day. Thank you so much for your time and input. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.